We start with lecture 4 this time. You have your limits, but this time ang limits natin is in, if you remember sa atong math 060, you have your limits for one variable. This time we have limits for two variables already. So more than one variable. We have the following limit from your math 060. The limit of a function f of x as x approaches a is equal to the value L. Provided you have the following exists, that is, the limit of the function as x approaches a from the right is equal to the limit of the function as x approaches a from the left. You also have to recall the following. We call this your right-hand limit. And then that means to say we have to look at values from the right of a. All values from the right of a when you have x approaches a from the right. On the other hand, this is what you call your left-hand limit. That is all the values from the left of a. So we have the limit of the function as x approaches a is equal to L, provided you have both your left-hand and right-hand limit actually exist. In that case, there are only two paths for one variable. You have as x approaches a from the right, and then as x approaches a from the left. That's what you learned earlier, not 060. So with two variables, we have to do something similar, but this time there will be more paths involved. Let's consider the following notation. If we would like to take the limit of the function f of xy as x approaches a and as y approaches b, we have the following notation. We take the limit of the function, this time in two variables, as x approaches a and at the same time y approaches b. Or the other notation, which is I prefer to use, is this: the limit of the function f of xy as xy approaches ab. So you have there xy approaches ab. You can use this, but most of the time prefer to make use of the notation. What does it mean? It says here the second notation is also a little more helpful in actually illustrating what we would like to take. Now, what we'd like to take, we would like to take the limit of this function f of xy as xy approaches ab, meaning say x approaches a at the same time y approaches b. So what do we do here? We have, if you take a look at this one, this is your value that we would like to approach. Like it says here that the problem that we are immediately faced is that there are literally an infinite number of paths that we can take as we move towards AB. So if this is your AB, you have that value, then you can take how many paths here. This is one way of approaching this value. This one is another way. This one is another. So how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you remember, as I've said earlier, sa inyong duha lang kabuok, di ba? Limit. Sa inyong one variable, ani lang. You recall, you only have, we have there the function f of x. You have there if this is your f of x and you would like to approach this function at a certain value a, you only have to approach it either from the left or from the right. So, diwa lang. Pero kani, if you take a look, this one, because nasa 3D na ta, ma-imagine niyo, pag nana mo sa 3D, daga na kayo agihanan. Dili na lang sa x and y axis. Nana mo'y lahing paths. So, because of that, if you remember, we say that the limit of the function exists if the limit of the function as x approaches a from the right and the limit of the function as x approaches a from the left are supposed to be equal. In this case, mangita lang ta og isa ka path nga dili sila mag-equal. So when that happens, then you can now say that the limit does not exist. Kasi dapat, for all paths, nag-exist siya. And so, it says here that we put a couple of straight line paths as well as a couple of stranger paths. Any straight line paths, this path and this path. And then the rest here, this one, this path na that would be actually a strange path. There are already 6 paths involved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this one, this path here, which is another path. So 6. In other words, to show that the limit exists, we would technically need to check an infinite number of paths and verify that the function is approaching the same value of the path we're using to approach. So, daghan kaayo. And how are we going to do that para ma-simplify? We say that a function f of xy is continuous at the point AB if the limit of f of xy as xy approaches AB is equal to the function at AB. Take a look at this from a graphical standpoint. Anong ibig sabihin niyan? It means the same thing as it did when we first saw continuity sa calculus 1. A function will be continuous at a point if the graph doesn't have any holes or breaks at that point. So that's one way of taking a look at it from the graphical point of view. What else do we know from calculus 1, from the previous calculus that we learned? The limit of f of xy approaches AB is equal to f of AB. So this is earlier said. So if we know that the function is continuous at a point, then all we need to do is to take the limit of the function at that point and plug into the point into the function. Diba? If you remember before, continuity, pag continuous siya, pag diretso siya ma-plug in, then makita niyo yung limit, then we can immediately say that the limit of the function exists. So one variable. Similarly, sa 2 variables, we have the same way of taking the limit of a function. Pwede siya directly substitute as long as it is actually continuous at that point. But it says here that you have to watch out for division by 0, square roots of negative numbers, logarithms of 0 are negative numbers. And let's take a look at the following example. Number 1, we're asked to determine if the following limit exists or not. If the 2 exist, give the value of the limit. So let's take a look at A first. Limit of 3x squared z plus yx cosine of pi x minus pi z. Notice that you have x, y, z approaches to 1, negative 1. Now, if you take a look at this, wala this restriction kay wala man siya na value sa ubos, di ba? Siya value sa denominator, so okay lang, basta dili siya mag-zero, wala possibility na mag-zero out. Now, if we directly substitute, what will we have? We will have the following. All we have to do is to plug in the values. X will be 2. So we'll have 3 times 2 squared. Then z is equal to negative 1. So we will have that. And then we'll have the following. 3 times 2 squared. Yung x natin is 2. And then ang y is z. So that's negative 1. Then y here is 1. So y approaches 1. X here is again, x here is approaching 2. So that's why you have 2 here. And then you have cosine of pi x minus pi z. What is pi x? Take a look. You will have here, tingnan natin to. That's cosine of, anong result niyan? 2 pi plus pi. That's cosine of 3 pi. Cosine of 3 pi. Diba? But what is cosine of 3 pi? Can you give in the value? Diba? This is pi, then you will have 2 pi, then you have 3 pi. So what's cosine of 3 pi? Cosine of 3 pi is equal to what? Ang value ng x dito, anong value ng x? Hello?
Negative
You
1.
still with huh? What's cosine of 3 pi?
Negative 1.
Yes, correct. That is equal to negative 1. It's negative 1. So that from there, you now have 3 times 2 squared will give you 4. 4 times 3. So 4 times 3, that will be 12 there. Correct? So you have 12, negative 1. 12 times negative 1, it will give you negative 12. And then this is 1 times 2, so plus you will have 2 times negative 1. So negative 12, negative 14 will give, negative 12, negative 2 will give you negative 14. Okay? Let's take a look at the other one. The limit of xy, x plus over x plus y. Notice that if you have this, it will not be continuous along the line y equals negative xy. If you have y equals negative x here, you will have x equals x plus the negative of x, which will be 0. So pag ma-0 siya, undefined siya. So it will not be continuous here. So since you'll get division by 0 when this is true. However, for this problem, you don't have to worry. Why? The point there we're taking up this limit is not on y is equal to negative x. Kasi ang value, x approaches 5 and y approaches 1. So, there is no possibility na mag-agi siya ani. Kaya ang x is approaching 5 and y is approaching 1. So, you also have to consider all those things. So, again, pwede ninyo madiretso na plug in ang value. Meaning to say, you will have x here is equal to the value 5. So, you will have 5 there. We have 5. And then, y there is the value 1. Tapos, ang sa ubos, you will have x again is 5. And then you have plus y, which is equal to 1. So, you come up with 5 over 6. Next, you have to consider, determine if the following limit exists or not. So if they do exist, give the value of the limit. Asa siya din ma-exist at this point? X squared should not be equal to y squared. Correct? But then, you can rewrite this as follows. Limit of 2x squared minus xy minus y squared. Okay, we'll give you that one. So, you rewrite this as, this can be factored as 2x plus y, x minus y. It will give you 2x squared plus xy minus 2xy. So, minus 2xy, and then you have plus xy will give you negative xy, negative y squared. So, although this will not be true when you have xy, you can actually divide out x minus y by x minus y. And because of that, you now have the following. The limit of 2x plus y, x plus y. So what would be the value from there? You can substitute the value na. It's like what we did before sa one variable. So you can now take a look at the values, which will give you 3 over 2. So, you remember this? This method, katong mag-factor and then mag-divide out? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Wala gihapon sa ito ang 2 variable. Determine the following, if the limit of the following exists or not. If they do exist, give the value of the limit. So let's take a look at this one. Kung i-direct sa mga napod, no, what will happen? 0 na. 0. 0 plus 0. So mag-in kag, dili siya pwede. But remember that it's just approaching 0. So let's take a look at the first one here. Limit of x squared y squared over x to the 4th plus 3y to the 4th. So it's not continuous at the point in question. So you cannot just simply plug in. Okay, as I've said, 0, 0. Also, we can factor this function and so can be cancelled. The limit can so that the limit can be taken. It says that we cannot factor it. So the function, therefore, is not continuous at that point. So the limit does not actually exist. But if we could find two different paths to approach the point that gave different values for the limit, then we would know that the limit didn't exist. X and Y axis. So you can try that one. And how do we do that? So along the x-axis, if we're going to approach 0, 0 along the x-axis, we know that at this point, your y is equal to 0. Bakit? Along the y-axis, ano apat? Kung dito sa, maniman ang ato ang y-axis. Pag along the x-axis. So kung ang path nato is along, kanina ng 0, 0 na i-approach ninyo, no? 0, that point. Along the x-axis, so along the x-axis kani, unsa man ang value sa y. So along the x-axis, ang y ninyo will be, kanina lang sa x-axis, y is equal to 0. Along the x-axis, you can plug in y equal to the 0 into the function, and then take the limit as x approaches 0. How do we do that? Kani. Madamis, so ako asang ipurahin yan para makita ninyo. Let's see. The general function is this, x squared over y squared, x to the fourth plus 3y to the fourth. When we are going to approach along the x-axis, what happens? Along the x-axis, meaning to say y equal to 0. So it changed the value, so xy equal to 0, 0. There x0, you have xy, no? So y is equal to 0, so 0, 0. So x squared, your y is replaced by 0. You can do that now. And you have x to the fourth. And then you have 3 times your y to the fourth. So you have 3 times 0. So the limit, therefore, is equal to 0. Because you have x squared over x to the fourth now. So you can have the limit to be equal to 0. But then, so along the x-axis, we have the function will approach 0 as we move towards the origin. But isa lang na siya kapath. You have to consider another path. Let's try the y-axis. So what happens pag along the axis? Pag along that axis, along the y-axis. Ani yung y-axis. So, pag along the y-axis, what do you think would be the value of x? Your x will now be equal to, kay kaniman, along this, x here is equal to
0.
Yes. So the limit now becomes what? You will now have, an original problem, limit of the function x squared times y squared over this, x to the fourth plus 3y to the fourth, xy. So this time, you will now have ang x na put ang 0, y approaches 0. Notice na pag substitute na, you'll have 0 squared, y squared over 0 to the fourth plus 3y to the fourth. So 0 kaya po sa taas, pero nakaka-divisor ng 3y to the fourth. So that will give you a value which is equal to 0. So what did we get? The same limit along two paths. You have to consider that duha lang ka path atong gitanhaw. So don't misread this. Kay we have duha ka path lang. Remember, daghan ba yung path? So this does not say that the limit exists. Duha naman yung i-check. And that's a value 0. This only means that the limit happens to have the same value along two paths. So take a look at the third fairly common path, which is the path along y equals x. Y equals x is kanang itsura ni nga path. Itsura na nga path. Kabalungan mo nga function, di ba? So kana nga path would now be y equals x. Kani nga path, no? Y equals x, sorry. Mistake. Y equals x. Ang path na ikuha na to kay kaniman. Kana nga path, then isa kay kani nga path. And what about this path? Kung approach na po na itong 0, 0, may point nga 0, 0, kana, dihan na po ito maagi. Do you think equal gihapon siya sa 0? So, you're going to replace all the y's with x. Kay equal man daw ang y of x. Y equals x. And then, let x approach 0. And then you take a look at the limit. So, xy approaches 0, 0. And then you replace kay y equal to x man. Diba? So, x equal to y. You will have x approaches 0, 0. What happens here? You will now have x to the fourth. Kay kani x squared. That's x to the fourth. X to the fourth, 3x to the fourth. 4x to the fourth. And that will give you 1/4. Remember, katong ato ang original notion na for the limit to exist, dapat sa lahat ng path na imong gamiton, dapat equal ang iyang limit. Otherwise, the limit will not exist. Nakuha? Although yung dalawang path, pareho sila na 0 ang value, but this time, ang ka-third na path will not give you 0. So, meaning to say, the limit does not exist. Yes? Dili. Choppy. I'm sorry. Am I choppy also? Choppy ako? Hello? Dili ko ka. I'm sorry, but I cannot hear you. Choppy ang inyong ano. Choppy ba pod ko? Hello? Okay ra?
Dili maayo sa kuwanon.
Naman ko bago na istorya na dunga ninyo. Choppy siya, di ba? Pero ako okay lang. You can hear me. Sige.
Yes,
Tingnan ta. Oo, sige. Good. Naman good mo rin. Nag-sound yung choppy. Hindi ko makaano. Let's go with the more general path, which is this line. Y equals mx. Most of the time, instead of katong path na sa x-axis, sa y-axis, along y equals to x, then we can make use of the general path, which is y equals. Here, we again have continuity problems at the origin. Y, we have there 0, 0. We'll have 0, 0. X to the 6, tapos y squared. So again, you cannot directly substitute. What are we going to do? Again, there's no factoring. Hindi man taka-factor kay x to the 6 plus y squared. So, we cannot do katong ganina po niya result. So, we can find some path again that give different values. So, you can consider the path y is equal to x. So, along this path, the limit becomes what value? We'll have, when y is equal to x, you will have your x, y here, pulihan na siya. Pareho naman sila, x, x na. No? Kaya y equals x man. As x, x approaches 0, 0. So you replace your x cubed y, you replace your y here by x, and replace your y squared here by x squared. Y squared, kay kaning y, equal naman siya sa x. Then you will now have x to the fourth over, this is x to the 6 plus x squared. So, if you take a look, 0, 0 na diha, x to the 6 plus x squared. What is this? That's now equal to, pwede naman yung ma-factor out, ang x to the 4th then ma-factor out din yung x squared. So, in factor out the x squared, you will have x squared times x to the 4th plus 1. So, ma-divide out na. So, mabilin din sa taas kay x squared over, you will now have x to the 4th plus 1. But, because of this is 0, dili na siya undefined sa ubos. So, we will have the value 0. Let's consider other path. So, another path would be at y equals x cubed. Let's see this path. Along this path, the limit now becomes what? So, kaning inyong y is replaced by x cubed. So, itsura sa x cubed. So, you will have x cubed, and then y is replaced by x cubed there, and then y squared is replaced by x cubed again. So, you square that one. What will you have? You will have x to the 6 over twice of, kaning kay x to the 6 naman, so twice of x to the 6. So, ma-cancel out ang x to the 6. Ang same result, the result will simply be equal to limit now of this one will become 1/2. Can cancel out, so 1/2. But as x, wala na may value sa x. Yeah. So you can now simply rewrite it as equal to 1/2. Because the limit of a constant, if you remember, limit of a constant, 1/2 here is equal to 1/2. So katong basic principle na atong gitunan before sa Math 060, I hope you did not forget, kay mo gihapon siya. So we now have two paths that give two different values for the limit. Ang isa, ang satong isa, you have the following. Balikan lang nako para makita ninyo. So 1/2 diri ang value, no? So I go to, pero sa isa, it is 0. So na-exist na duha na different values for two different paths, meaning to say the limit does not exist. There are several examples here. Let's see. 5/18 ang answer. Let us see. Bakit 5/18? XYZ, pwede ba siya ma-directly substitute? If you take a look, let us see. Dili ba siya ma-0 sa ubos? We will have limit. We have x cubed. X there is equal to, let's see here, -1, no? -1 cubed. Then you have minus z there is 4. Then you have e to the 2. Then ang y nato is 0. So, sa taas, you will have -1 minus 4. You have e to the 0 will give you 1. Correct? And then sa ubos, let us see sa ubos. 6 times, you will have -1. X is -1. Plus 2 times, you will have y is 0. Minus, and ayan. Minus 3 times z there is 4. What is this? -6. May wire na. Wait, kasi ang ballpen ko hindi function properly. So that should give you actually, sa ubos kay, -6 plus 0, so -12. So, okay. So we have the answer. The answer there is, this is negative, sa taas kay -5, then you have over -18. So ang value is actually ito, +5/18. Correct? Now let's take a look at number 2. The limit of x squared minus 2xy over x squared minus 4y squared as xy approaches to 1. Let's take a look at this one. Ma-factor ang common dito ang x. Factor of x. Then here, ang common diri, this is difference of two squares. You'll have x minus 2y, x plus 2y. In this case, you can actually divide out x minus 2y by x minus 2y. So, mabilin is your x over x plus 2y. And if you immediately substitute, you will have now the value. Okay, pwede naman siya, no? X there is equal to 2, and then you will have 2 plus 2 times 1. What will be the value? You will have 1/2. Kasi x equal to 2 will give you Wait, ha? Direct substitute natin. We'll have 2 over x, that is 2 plus 2 times, you have your y is 1. So that's equal to 2 over 4. So that's equal to 1/2. There are other ways also. Let us take a look at this. Xy, x minus 4y over 6y plus 7x. If you immediately plug in the 0, we get 0 in the numerator and the denominator. So that's not the right way. So there is also no factoring. So no doable limit at this point. What do we do now? We just proceed as if the limit doesn't exist. Means we need to find two different paths upon which the limit has different values. So consider ninyo na po ang path na at y equal to 0. Go through the path with the x-axis. So if it's with the path at x-axis, okay, kani man ang x-axis ninyo, kung kani nga path atong gamiton, it will happen, your value is y equal to 0. So kani nga path. Let's take a look at that one. The limit now when xy here, your y here is equal to 0. Replace y. Ito man yung y nyo. Replace that y equal to 0. So we will now have x minus 4 times 0. So we will only have x. And then 6y, that is 0 na. So 7 times x. So nang lalabas, you will have the following value, 1 over 7. Okay, it's 1 over 7. Now, let's take a look at the value of the limit when you pass through the y-axis. So, when you have the y-axis na, dali na po mo agi sa y-axis, the value here is x equal to 0. Now, pulihan na po ni, kaning this one, x here, you have to change that into 0. So, x minus 4y, 6y, what happens? So, when x equal to 0, 0 po. So, negative 4, tapos 6. So, what do we have? Negative 2/3. But what is the limit now of negative 2/3? But negative 2/3 man na. And dili na, different paths that give different values, meaning to say the limit does not exist. So I leave the rest to you, number 4, to understand. Then, let me see. We can use the path here. Kompleto naman yung solution. We have 0. For the second path, what do you have? Come up with that 1 sa infinity. So meron ka ng path na magkaiba ang limit, then you can conclude that the limit actually does not exist. You have this. We have two different paths that give different values of the limit, so the limit now actually does not exist.